I had always believed that supporting your family was just what decent people do. For years, I dedicated my life to ensuring my parents had everything they needed, from paying off their mortgage to funding their lifestyle. I never questioned my role until that fateful Thanksgiving when I accidentally overheard my father proudly tell my uncle that I was their reliable freeloader they had trained well. All those years of sacrifice, the missed vacations, the extra hours at work, the postponed dreams, suddenly made sense in the worst way possible. Before I tell you how I discovered my own parents' betrayal after years of supporting them, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever felt taken advantage of by the very people who should appreciate you most. Growing up in a modest neighborhood in Seattle, I watched my parents, Harold and Margaret, struggle financially throughout my childhood. We were never poor enough to qualify for assistance, but never comfortable enough to relax about money either. Our house was small but clean, our clothes often from discount stores, but always presentable. I learned early that money was tight, and not to ask for extras. Despite our limited resources, I excelled academically. My parents encouraged my studies, though they could offer little help beyond moral support. When college acceptance letters arrived, I felt both elation and dread. The scholarships I received covered only part of the tuition, leaving a significant gap. During college, I juggled 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a nearly perfect GPA. Mondays and Wednesdays, I stocked inventory at a campus bookstore before classes. Evenings, I delivered food for a local restaurant. Weekends, I tutored underclassmen in computer science. Sleep became a luxury, but I never complained. This was my investment in my future. After graduation, I landed a junior developer position at a growing tech company in Seattle. The starting salary seemed enormous compared to my college poverty. My first instinct was to help my parents. I remember the first time I paid one of their bills. Mom had mentioned their water heater broke, and they were taking cold showers until the next payday. Without hesitation, I drove over with my second paycheck and gave them enough for the repair and a bit extra. Their gratitude felt wonderful. Dad clapped me on the shoulder with pride, and Mom hugged me tight enough to crack ribs. That warm feeling of being their hero became addictive. As my career progressed, my responsibilities at work increased along with my salary. Within 5 years, I had been promoted twice and doubled my income. With each raise, I increased my support to my parents. What started as occasional help with unexpected expenses evolved into regular contributions toward their mortgage. When I turned 27, I made a decision that would define the next several years of my life. My parents were struggling with their mortgage payments again, and the stress was affecting their health. I offered to take over their mortgage entirely. To accommodate this significant expense, I downsized from my comfortable 1-bedroom apartment to a studio half the size. I calculated that the money saved on rent, combined with my recent promotion to mid-level developer, would cover their housing costs without completely draining my savings. My parents accepted with tearful gratitude, though, in retrospect, there was something performative about their reaction. Within weeks, their requests expanded. The cable package needed upgrading. The refrigerator was making noise. The backyard needed landscaping. Each need seemed reasonable in isolation, but together they formed a pattern I was too blind to see. My girlfriend at the time, Sophia, noticed before I did. We were having dinner at my cramped studio when she asked why I lived so modestly despite my good salary. When I explained about my parents' mortgage and other support, she frowned. "Do they ever help you in return?" she asked. I defended them immediately. They raised me, gave me everything they could. This is just me paying it back. Sophia dropped the subject, but her question lingered in my mind, though not enough to change my behavior. That spring, I declined a company retreat that might have led to further promotion, because my parents needed help renovating their bathroom. I spent 2 weeks of vacation time ripping out tile and installing fixtures, instead of networking with executives at a beachside resort. When I mentioned the missed opportunity in passing, my father said, "Well, family comes first, right?" My mother added, "We would have had to hire someone expensive without you, and you know our budget is tight." I nodded, ignoring the fact that I had paid for all the materials and was essentially working as free labor on top of paying their mortgage. Taking care of family is just what you do, I told myself. The pattern continued. When I could not fulfill a request immediately due to work commitments, subtle guilt-tripping followed. Mom would sigh and say they would just make do in a tone that made it clear, Making do was barely one step above total catastrophe. For my 30th birthday, I bought myself a new laptop to replace my failing one. My mother called the same day to mention their 15-year-old television was showing lines across the screen. I found myself ordering them a new smart TV before I had even set up my laptop. Looking back, I should have noticed that my generosity was rarely acknowledged anymore. When I transferred $5,000 to help them pay off a credit card, they did not even call to thank me. I noticed but buried my disappointment. They were my parents, after all. They did not need to thank me for doing my duty. Everything changed when I met Alyssa. Unlike Sophia, who had eventually tired of competing with my parents for time and resources, Alyssa initially seemed to understand my sense of family obligation. She came from a close-knit family herself and valued loyalty. We met at a coffee shop near my office. I had been working remotely from there to avoid my increasingly depressing studio apartment. She sat beside me with her laptop, and we struck up a conversation about coding editors. By our third coffee date, I knew she was special. As our relationship grew serious, so did my career. I was promoted to senior developer, which came with more responsibility and longer hours, but also a substantial pay increase. Ironically, the promotion that should have given me more financial freedom only tied me more securely to my parents' increasing demands. Mom and Dad began complaining that they hardly saw me anymore, though I still visited at least twice a month and called several times weekly. I compensated for my absence with more financial support, which they accepted without comment, while continuing to lament my unavailability. For their 35th wedding anniversary, I surprised my parents with a new car. Their old sedan had served them faithfully for over a decade, but was becoming unreliable. I spent weeks researching the safest, most economical options before selecting a modestly priced but well-rated model. When I drove it to their house with a big bow on the hood, their reaction was underwhelming. Mom glanced at the car and asked why I had chosen silver instead of blue. Dad immediately began questioning the fuel efficiency compared to his old car, even though I had selected a model that would save them money on gas. No thank you, no appreciation for the significant financial sacrifice. Just immediate criticism and questions. I pushed aside my disappointment. They were from a different generation. They showed love differently. These were the excuses I made to myself. A month later, when Alyssa and I announced our engagement, my parents' response was to ask if we could help them plan a vacation to Florida before the wedding. They had always wanted to visit, and now seemed like a good time. At home that night, Alyssa broached the subject that would eventually fracture my relationship with my parents. "Felix, I love how much you care for your family, but I am worried about our future," she said carefully. "I have been adding up what you spend on your parents each month, and it is more than our rent and expenses combined." I became defensive immediately. "They are my parents," I told her. "They gave me life. They did their best for me. I cannot just abandon them now that they are older." Our first major argument followed. Alyssa was not suggesting abandonment, merely reasonable boundaries. In my distorted thinking, any reduction in support felt like betrayal. The conflict between my fiancé and my parents came to a head when I missed our anniversary dinner because Mom called with an emergency. I rushed to their house only to discover the emergency was their television remote had stopped working. I spent the evening troubleshooting their entertainment system, while Alyssa sat alone at the restaurant I had reserved weeks in advance. When I finally arrived home, she was understandably furious. "I cannot compete with your parents for the rest of our lives, Felix," she said. "They have become your entire identity. You are not their son anymore. You are their personal ATM." Her words stung because part of me recognized their truth. Still, I defended my parents. "You do not understand what family means," I shot back, immediately regretting my words. Despite our disagreements, Alyssa and I moved forward with wedding plans. Meanwhile, I continued supporting my parents, even paying for a luxury cruise for them, while simultaneously telling Alyssa we needed to postpone our honeymoon to save money. My work life suffered as well. I took on additional projects for extra income, working 80-hour weeks until my health began deteriorating. Chronic headaches, insomnia, and constant fatigue became my new normal. Alyssa begged me to see a doctor, but I claimed I did not have time. When my father decided to retire early, I paid for a lavish retirement party at his favorite restaurant. Throughout the evening, he received congratulations and well wishes, while I stood in the background, my credit card having funded the entire celebration. Not once during his speech did he acknowledge my contribution, financial or otherwise. Later that night, I overheard a conversation between my parents and my aunt that sent the first real cracks through my delusion. My aunt asked how they planned to manage on just my mother's part-time income. Harold laughed and said, "Felix has it covered. We have raised him right." My aunt looked concerned. "You cannot expect your son to support you forever." "Why not?" Mom replied. "He has a good job and no real expenses of his own." "What else would he do with his money?" I walked away before they noticed me, a strange numbness spreading through my chest. That night I mentioned the conversation to Alyssa, who simply held my hand and said, "I think you know this is not right, Felix. You just have not been ready to admit it." Still, I made excuses. Maybe they were just joking. Maybe I had misunderstood. Maybe this was normal in families. After another month of increasing demands, including a request to help them renovate their kitchen before winter, Alyssa delivered an ultimatum. She loved me, but she would not enter a marriage where my parents were equal financial partners. Something needed to change after the wedding, or she would have to reconsider our future together. Feeling trapped between the two sides of my life, I promised to establish boundaries after we were married. To prove my commitment, I told my parents the kitchen renovation would be the last major expense I would cover. I would continue helping with essentials, but luxury items and renovations would need to come from their own resources. They agreed, seemingly understanding. The kitchen renovation cost nearly $30,000, draining the savings I had meant to use for our honeymoon. I told myself it was worth it for the peace it would bring to my relationship with Alyssa. Less than a week after the kitchen was completed, Dad called to discuss trading in their car for a newer model. The one I had bought them 2 years earlier was perfectly functional, but apparently now they wanted something with more features. For the first time, I refused. The conversation was uncomfortable, with long silences and subtle guilt trips, but I held firm. Afterward, I felt both guilty and proud. Setting this boundary was harder than working 60 hours of overtime, but Alyssa was right. Something needed to change. Little did I know how dramatically that change would come. Thanksgiving had always been a big event in our family. This year was no exception, with my parents hosting the usual gathering of relatives. Alyssa and I arrived early to help prepare, though my mother had made it clear she preferred to handle the cooking herself. We were relegated to setting the table and bringing in extra chairs from the garage. While carrying folding chairs through the backyard, I heard male voices from around the corner of the house. My father and Uncle Jim were smoking cigars, unaware of my presence. "That new kitchen looks amazing." "Harold," my uncle was saying, "Felix must be doing really well to afford all this." I paused, curious about my father's response. What followed would forever change my relationship with my parents. "We have got it made, Jim," my father chuckled. "Felix is the most reliable freeloader we could ask for. We have trained him well." I froze, the chairs suddenly heavy in my arms. My uncle sounded uncomfortable. "Freeloader seems like the opposite to me. The kid is supporting you." My father's laugh turned derisive. No, you have got it backward. See, a freeloader takes without giving back. We have flipped the script. We are taking everything he is willing to give, and he thinks it is his idea. Best retirement plan we could have asked for." I heard my mother join them, the back door closing behind her. "Are you telling Jim about our golden goose?" she asked, her voice light with amusement. "Just explaining our retirement strategy," Dad replied. "Felix thinks it is his duty to support us. We will never have to worry about money again." They all laughed, and Mom added, "And did you see that pathetic apartment he lives in? Also, we can have granite countertops." I almost feel bad. Almost. More laughter. I stood motionless, unable to process what I was hearing. My vision narrowed to a pinpoint, and my heart hammered so loudly I was certain they would hear it. The chairs slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the patio stones. The conversation stopped abruptly. "Felix, is that you?" my father called out. I could not answer, could not move, could not breathe. Somehow I managed to pick up the chairs and retreat into the house, where I collapsed onto a kitchen chair, shaking uncontrollably. Alyssa found me there, pale and trembling. "What happened?" she asked, kneeling beside me. The words felt like broken glass in my throat. "They called me a freeloader," I whispered. "A reliable freeloader they trained well." Her face darkened with anger as I recounted what I had overheard. All these years, the thousands of dollars, the missed opportunities, the sacrifices, and they had been laughing behind my back, treating me like an ATM they had cleverly programmed to dispense cash on demand. "You need to confront them," Alyssa said firmly. "Today. Now." I shook my head. "Not with everyone here. I cannot ruin Thanksgiving. They ruined it. Not you," she countered, but respected my wish to wait. The dinner passed in a blur. I mechanically filled my plate, pushed food around, and responded with one-word answers when addressed directly. My parents seemed oblivious to my distress, busy playing the perfect hosts to our extended family. After the last relative departed, Alyssa squeezed my hand under the table. I took a deep breath and began clearing plates, my movements stiff and deliberate. "That was quite a success," Mom said cheerfully, boxing leftover pie. "Your Aunt Jenny asked for my sweet potato recipe." I placed the stack of dishes on the counter with controlled precision. "Why did you call me a freeloader?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. The kitchen went silent. My parents exchanged quick glances. "What are you talking about, son?" Dad asked, his expression carefully arranged into confusion. "I heard you. In the backyard with Uncle Jim. You called me a reliable freeloader. You trained well. Mom joined in about your golden goose. I heard everything." My mother's face flushed. "You misunderstood Felix. It was just a joke between family." "A joke," I repeated. "You find it funny that I have spent years supporting you, that I live in a studio apartment while paying for your mortgage and renovations." Dad shifted to defensive anger. "Now listen here. After all we have done for you, raising you, putting food on the table, clothes on your back, this is the thanks we get. You eavesdrop on private conversations and then throw our words back at us. All you have done for me," I said, my voice rising. "I paid off your mortgage. I bought your car. I funded your early retirement. I just spent $30,000 on your kitchen, and it is the least you could do." Mom snapped, then immediately covered her mouth, realizing what she had revealed. Dad jumped in. "After all we have done raising you, you owe us this comfortable life. It is your duty as our son." The words hit me like a physical blow. Duty. The very concept I had used to justify years of financial servitude. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. This was not a healthy family relationship. This was financial abuse disguised as family obligation. "I am done," I said quietly. "What do you mean, done?" Mom demanded. "I mean I am done supporting you financially. I am done being your personal bank. I am done sacrificing my future for people who see me as nothing but a source of income." Dad laughed nervously. "Come on, son. You cannot be serious. What about the property taxes due next month? What about the trip we planned to Vegas?" "Not my problem anymore," I replied, a strange calm settling over me. "You both have pensions. You have savings. You have a fully paid-off house thanks to me. You will be fine. Just not in the lifestyle you have become accustomed to at my expense." The panic in their eyes would have been comical if it were not so tragic. They immediately switched tactics, backpedaling furiously. "We did not mean those things we said," Mom insisted, tears forming. "You know how your father jokes. We appreciate everything you do for us." "Did," I corrected. "Everything I did for you, past tense." I took Alyssa's hand and walked toward the door, my parents trailing behind us, their protests growing more desperate with each step. "Felix, wait," Dad called out. "We can talk about this. We can work something out." I turned at the door. "We can have a relationship," I said, "but not a financial one. If you want me in your life, it will be as your son, not your ATM." Mom began sobbing dramatically. "You cannot just abandon us." "I am not abandoning you. I am just stopping the money. There is a difference." As Alyssa and I walked to the car, my parents continued calling out, alternating between guilt trips and desperate backtracking. I did not look back. The weeks following Thanksgiving were some of the hardest of my life. Despite knowing I had made the right decision, guilt weighed heavily on me. Years of conditioning do not disappear overnight. My parents launched a multi-pronged attack of guilt, anger, and manipulation. First came the daily tearful phone calls from Mom asking how I could do this to them after all they had sacrificed. Then came the angry voicemails from Dad calling me ungrateful and selfish. When those tactics failed, they enlisted family members to plead their case. Fortunately, Alyssa suggested therapy, and I found a counselor specializing in family dynamics and financial abuse. Through weekly sessions, I began to understand the manipulative relationship that had defined my adult life. I was not breaking a sacred family bond by cutting off financial support. I was establishing healthy boundaries that should have existed all along. The financial impact of my decision was immediately apparent. Without my parents as dependents, my salary stretched remarkably further. For the first time since college, I did not live paycheck to paycheck. Alyssa and I moved from my cramped studio to a comfortable two-bedroom apartment. We resumed planning our wedding this time, with a reasonable budget that did not drain our savings. My parents' messages evolved as the weeks passed. The guilt trips gave way to apologies and promises to do better, always circling back to requests for just a little help with this bill or that repair. I maintained my boundary firmly but kindly. We could have dinner. We could talk on the phone. We could rebuild our relationship. But I would not give them money. Through it all, I found unexpected support from friends, and even some family members who had witnessed my parents' behavior over the years. My cousin Thomas called to tell me he had always thought my situation was unhealthy, but had not known how to broach the subject. My close friend Marcus admitted he had been worried about me for years, watching me work myself to exhaustion for parents who never seemed satisfied. 6 months after cutting off financial ties, the change in my life was dramatic. My chronic headaches disappeared. I slept through the night for the first time in years. At work, my performance improved, earning me another promotion. Most importantly, my relationship with Alyssa flourished without the constant strain of my parents' demands. We married in a simple but beautiful ceremony that we paid for ourselves. My parents declined to attend when they realized I would not be covering their travel expenses or hotel. Their absence hurt, but it confirmed I had made the right decision. As a wedding gift to ourselves, we put a down payment on a modest house, something I never could have afforded while supporting my parents' lifestyle. The day we moved in, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was mine, earned through hard work and protected by healthy boundaries. 8 months after Thanksgiving, I ran into my parents at a community festival. The change in their appearance was noticeable. Gone were the designer clothes and expensive watches. Their new car had been replaced by an older model, similar to the one they had driven before my financial support began. They looked older, less polished, but not unhealthy or destitute. A part of me felt compassion for them. Despite everything, they were still my parents. I approached them cautiously and offered a greeting. For a moment, I saw hope in their eyes, quickly followed by calculation. "We have missed you," Mom said, embracing me awkwardly. "Have you thought any more about helping us with the roof repair?" And just like that, I knew nothing had changed. They still saw me primarily as a source of funds, not as a son seeking a genuine relationship. "I wish you well," I told them sincerely. "If you ever want to have dinner and just talk without discussing money, my door is open." They exchanged glances, clearly disappointed. "Your father and I are really struggling," Mom tried again. "Is this how you were raised, to turn your back on family?" "I am not turning my back on family," I replied. "I am offering a relationship without financial strings. The choice is yours." They walked away without answering, and I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The door remained open for reconciliation, but I no longer carried the burden of their financial well-being. A year after that fateful Thanksgiving, Alyssa shared the news that we were expecting our first child. As I placed my hand on her still flat stomach, I made a silent promise to our unborn child. They would grow up understanding the difference between genuine love and financial obligation. They would learn that family supports each other in many ways, not just monetarily. Most importantly, they would know that their value was not measured by what they could provide, but by who they were. The greatest lesson I learned through this painful journey was that self-worth cannot be purchased. For years, I tried to buy my parents' love through financial support, missing the fundamental truth that real love does not come with a price tag. True family lifts you up, not drains you dry. By establishing healthy boundaries, I did not just save my bank account, I saved myself. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding freedom through self-respect. And if you know someone struggling with unhealthy family dynamics, share this video with them. Sometimes the greatest act of love is learning to say no. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth is not measured by what you give, but by who you are.